Tonight, justice at last for Jazelle Pelico as her husband is jailed for 20 years after he drugged his wife and invited dozens of strangers to rape her. 50 other men are also found guilty as a defiant Jazelle said she hoped the public nature of the trial would help change society.
I now have confidence in our ability to collectively build a future in which each woman and man can live in harmony with respect and mutual understanding.
Also in tonight's programme, a neo-Nazi from Falkirk who amassed an armoury at his home has been jailed for 10 years. Alan Edward discussed attacking a local LGBT group and openly expressed racist, homophobic and anti-Semitic views.
Coming up in tonight's sport, we hear from two Scots lighting up Italian football.
And later we've got Panto, music and even a four-legged friend. Why would you go anywhere else?
Welcome to the Nine.
The trial is over, but the sense of shock, the questions and the scrutiny are not. In France, the former husband of this woman, Jazelle Pelico, has been jailed for 20 years for drugging and raping her and arranging for other men to rape her while she lay unconscious. 50 of them have also been convicted. It happened repeatedly over many years. Dominique Pelico's crimes have shocked France and the world. Jazelle Pelico says she never regretted making her ordeal public. Our correspondent Andrew Harding reports from the court in Avignon in the south of France.
The accused arrived early at court, faces masked as usual, some with their prison bags already packed. But the crowd here in Avignon and the forest of cameras were not here for the men. This trial has, in so many ways now, become all about this woman, Jazelle Pelico. Her face at least seemed serene this morning. The rape victim who refused to feel shame. Inside the crowded courtroom, the judge quickly got on with the business of the day. Verdicts first, then sentencing for all 51 men. Dominique Pelico sat quietly in his glass cage as the judge turned to address him.
The defendants will stand up in turn to hear the verdicts. Mr. Pelico first. The court finds him guilty of aggravated rape.
Inside the courtroom here, the verdicts have been coming at a furious pace. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Dominique Pelico has just stood up to be told that he will be sentenced to 20 years in prison, the maximum here in France for rape. He showed no emotion, nor did his former wife, Jazelle, sitting quietly at the other side of the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, some people celebrated the news. But others were angry that many of the men got lighter sentences than anticipated. Shame, they shouted. Back inside, Dominique Pelico's lawyer told me her client was considering an appeal. I asked what his mood was like. Fatalistic, she replied, the way he's always been throughout the trial. And then, after a pause, Jazelle Pelico emerged to make a short statement.
I want to express my deepest gratitude to all the people who have supported me throughout this ordeal. I was overwhelmed by your support, and I drew from it the strength to come back every day to face these long days of hearings. I wanted to open the doors of this trial last September so that society could see what was happening. I have never regretted this decision. I have confidence now in our capacity, collectively, to find a better future in which men and women alike can live harmoniously together with respect and mutual understanding. Thank you.
It's half a century now since the Pelicos met and fell in love. She described him as a perfect husband. But in 2020, Dominique Pelico was caught in this footage filming up women's skirts in a local supermarket. Police soon discovered other videos proving that he'd been drugging his wife and inviting dozens of strangers to rape her as he filmed.
Monsieur Pelico avec sa femme, c'est...
Mr. Pelico desired total control over his wife. He wanted to reduce her to an object, a possession to be used for his satisfaction. Then he could lend this object to other people, and to do all that, he needed to drug her.
And this wasn't his first crime. DNA evidence soon proved Pelico had begun attacking women years earlier. He also took indecent images of his daughter Caroline, who was in court today along with her two brothers. She's convinced her father also raped her. This afternoon, Pelico and most of the other rapists were taken away to begin their sentences. There was a moment of tension outside when one of the defence lawyers taunted the crowd, calling them hysterical, then swearing at them. Here comes Jazelle Pelico now, leaving the courthouse for the last time. She has achieved something quite extraordinary here, this courageous public stance. The impact of that will surely ripple through society here, perhaps for decades. She could, like most rape victims, have chosen to remain anonymous at the trial. Instead, listen to the reaction she now receives. She wanted to change attitudes, and perhaps she has. Rise up, they sing. And with that, Madame Pelico, engulfed by gratitude, walks on. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Avignon.
Well, as we saw, Jazelle Pelico attended almost every day of the trial. Her bravery and determination drew crowds to the court and admiration from around the world. Seema Katecha looks at the wider impact this trial could have.
This shocking case has been a worldwide talking point. In Belgium, people protested in solidarity with Jazelle Pelico. While in Australia, women made her a scarf which she wore to court for several days. And over here, the case is very much in sharp focus, in the media and beyond. Jade says she was raped while sleeping. She was paid £35,000 in compensation by the Crown Prosecution Service after her case was wrongly dropped.
It was a horrific experience, having that kind of realisation, waking up to this immense sense of being violated but not really knowing what had happened.
Do you think that the Pelico case will have an impact on how sexual violence is viewed in this country?
Certainly had a rippling effect on myself. It's made me feel a sense of more courage to come forward, and I really kind of reaffirmed the reason why I decided to waive my anonymity. And I think it's going to have a wider impact on many victims feeling that it's okay to come forward, and as Jazelle has been saying, the shame is not ours to bear.
For some rape victims, anonymity is crucial though, and enables them to come forward without judgment from others. Revealing their identity is a personal choice. The Crown Court backlog stands at more than 70,000 cases, meaning some victims are waiting years for justice. The Home Office says the charge rate in England and Wales is under 3%. Some lawyers say sexual violence isn't taken seriously enough.
Well, I certainly have that view. You know, if you or I were raped today and reported it, we would not get to trial until February 2027 in this country. And for that reason, victims withdraw because it takes so much time to get justice.
The hope of many is that Jazelle Pelico's extraordinary bravery will shine as a beacon and tackle the reality that far too many rapists simply get away with it without facing justice for this crime. Seema Katecha, BBC News.
Earlier, I spoke to Marcia Scott of Scottish Women's Aid, and I asked her about the impact the decision by Jazelle Pelico to waive her anonymity might have had.
I think nobody would mistake the extraordinary amount of courage that it took to make that decision. And it so reminds me of the the comments I've heard from so many survivors who've gone through horrific experiences, and then often horrific experiences at the hands of the justice system, and they said, well, I'll never get justice, real justice for what happened to me, but if I can improve the landscape for the women who might come after me, then it's worth my sacrifice. And I can't but imagine that that was the case for this woman.
It was certainly a striking image to see her turning up every day at court, supported by her children, to face her husband, someone that she, until all this became clear, she trusted.
Yeah. And I think that for us, that's, you know, one of the take-home messages of so much of the work and this case is that that's what domestic abuse is all about. You know, you're being treated the most shamefully by the person in the world who says that he's supposed to love you and care for you and protect you. And so often what goes on in all of that is the gaslighting, the coercive control, and the challenging women's understanding of reality. And that so happened here. And you know, I again, the courage to come forward for her, the fact that that the case has garnered so much international attention makes me want to be able to emphasize for people that, you know, this is the case for most sexual assaults. They do happen in the context of domestic abuse. And we have to understand the harmful impact of those things that are both physical and non-physical, and respond appropriately. But also, I worry a little bit about the tendency to sensationalize this kind of a crime, and to make sure that what we don't do is glorified in some way that doesn't make any difference for people on the ground, doesn't improve the system, but does encourage potential perpetrators.
Well, I wanted to ask you a bit about the other men who were on trial here. Of the 50 co-defendants, 46 were found guilty of rape. The family are not happy at the sentences that they have received, and it's also sparked a conversation, a debate about the definition of rape within France. What do you make of the sentences in that conversation?
I think it's very, very difficult to imagine, maybe especially if you're a woman and working in the field that I work in, to imagine a sentence that's adequate. And I certainly know that that all of our systems tend to minimize the harm and create sentences that are good for the system rather than for the victim. So I would absolutely sympathize and support the family's concerns. I think the other point for me to make about just the sheer number of perpetrators in this case is something that John Swinney said earlier this week or last week about listening to young women talk about the abuse that they receive from young men, and saying that he thinks that that men and boys in Scotland, and don't anybody fool yourself that this couldn't have happened in Scotland, that men, you know, engage in some chilling behavior. And I think if there was anything that could be considered chilling behavior, it would be this case. But also, we mustn't be smug that somehow because it happened in France, it couldn't happen here, because it absolutely could, because it's based on the same principles of abuse and entitlement.
Okay. Marcia Scott from Scottish Women's Aid, many thanks indeed.
You're welcome.
If you've been affected by sexual abuse or violence, details of help and support are available at bbc.co.uk/action line, or you can call for free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 077 077. A neo-Nazi who amassed an armoury of weapons at his home in a village on the outskirts of Falkirk has been jailed for 10 years. Alan Edward was convicted of 4 terrorism charges and had discussed launching an attack against an LGBT group. Aileen Clark reports.
In September 2022, this end terrace house in Reading on the outskirts of Falkirk was raided by armed police before dawn. Inside, they found weapons including a crossbow, 14 knives, some with Nazi insignia, machetes, a samurai sword and a stun gun. Prosecutors said there were so many it amounted to an armoury. Alan Edward had come to the attention of counter-terrorism investigators after posting a video glorifying a banned far-right group.
Part of our investigation was in the online space. Once we received a warrant to be enforced at his home address in Falkirk, officers went through that front door, and we were particularly alarmed and shocked at what we found in terms of the array of weaponry that was contained there, which we did not necessarily expect. Thankfully, those weapons have been taken off our streets and ensure that no harm will come to members of the public.
In passing sentence today, the judge Fiona Tate noted Edward's social media activity, supporting a banned organisation, posting messages of a racist and anti-Semitic nature, intending to stir up racial hatred and other activity which was homophobic and transphobic in nature. She jailed him for 10 years, and after release he will be on licence for 5 years.
You publicly and extensively posted views of an extreme right-wing nature, and you were found in possession of numerous weapons in circumstances giving rise to a reasonable suspicion that you acted for a purpose connected with the commission, preparation or instigation of an act of terrorism.
Edward appeared by video link from Lomos Prison to hear how long he will stay in jail. On release, he will also be monitored for 30 years under a provision of the terrorism legislation. Aileen Clark, BBC News.
Some of the day's other news, and Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Russia should have invaded Ukraine sooner and been better prepared for war. During a 4-hour annual appearance, Mr. Putin claimed Russia had regained its sovereignty under his leadership. The suspect accused of killing a US healthcare executive will be extradited to New York to face murder charges. Luigi Mangione allegedly shot Brian Thompson in a killing that's made headlines worldwide. 4 people have been injured after a bus crashed into a railway bridge in Ayrshire. The roof of the double-decker was torn off in the collision in Kilmarnock this afternoon. And the Scottish Secretary has rejected accusations his government betrayed women campaigning over changes to state pensions. Women Against State Pension Inequality, also known as WASPI Women, had the backing of Labour when the party was in opposition. Aberdeen residents whose homes are going to be demolished because of the potentially dangerous concrete known as rack have started receiving valuations for their homes. Some homeowners have been told their properties are worth only around a third of the estimated pre-rack value. The council says it's following statutory guidelines. Louise Hosey reports.
Just over a year ago, it emerged 500 homes in Aberdeen contained rack. The council plans to demolish them, including 138 which are privately owned. Homeowners have started receiving valuations, which crucially deduct the cost of the rack roof panels. This pensioner, who wants to remain anonymous, bought his home from the council using his life savings. His property has now been valued at £20,000 with a £2,000 home loss payment. It's left him in limbo, unable to buy anywhere else.
Everything would have been hunky-dory now, but it's thrown a spanner in the works. I won't be able to get a mortgage for another flat. It's a worry, it's been terrible. If I don't get a house that suits me, I'm not moving. £20,000 is nothing, is it?
Other residents are refusing to engage with the council. One of them says he's heard from people receiving valuations which are up to £50,000 less than the pre-rack value of their home.
That, for the majority, will put them under severe financial strain and will remove them permanently from the property ladder. They'll never own houses, their own homes again. I suspected this would be the result, which is completely unacceptable.
Aberdeen City Council says it's working with the Valuation Office Agency and the process they're following is in line with statutory guidance. They say each claim is based on its own merit and that they're holding talks with the Scottish and UK government regarding funding. Rack has also been identified in homes in other parts of Scotland. Residents there may well be looking at the situation here and wondering what that means for them. As valuations start to come back, what was already a stressful time is now magnified in the run-up to Christmas. Louise Hosey, BBC News.
The father of a victim of the Lockerbie bombing has called on Sir Keir Starmer to publish everything the UK government knows about the atrocity. This Saturday will see the 36th anniversary of the attack. Dr Jim Swire, whose daughter Flora died, says the government can no longer justify withholding information on the case. The Foreign Office says it's followed the process of opening archive files as set out under the law. Our Home Affairs correspondent David Cowan has the story.
2025 will see two major television productions on the Lockerbie bombing, and in May a real-life drama in Washington when Libyan suspect Abu Agila Massoud goes on trial accused of making the bomb. The first TV series goes out next month, based on a book by Dr Jim Swire.
Hello? Are you sure? Are you completely sure?
Now 88, Dr Swire hopes the Sky series will spark fresh public debate over Lockerbie.
The more people have a look at what goes on over the fallout from Lockerbie, now 36 years out, the happier I'll be, because I think if you look at the underlying information, it's all there. You can make your own decision then about whether you believe the official version or the alternative that we've laboured so hard to find.
The version accepted by a Scottish court was that 270 people were murdered that night by Abdel Basit al-Megrahi and other members of the Libyan intelligence service. Jim Swire believes it was the work of a Syrian-backed group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, in revenge for the shooting down of an Iranian airliner by the US Navy. That was the defence rejected at the Lockerbie trial 24 years ago.
Well, we have powerful evidence to show why the evidence that was led in that trial is not to be trusted.
Dr Swire claims forensic evidence about this fragment of bomb timer fatally undermines the link between Lockerbie and Libya. The head of the Crown Office, the Lord Advocate Dorothy Baines, said the trial court held that this act of state-sponsored terrorism was orchestrated by the Libyan government and that Megrahi was involved with others. That verdict has been the subject of intense scrutiny and has been upheld twice in the appeal courts. From the very start, Jim Swire has wanted a public inquiry to examine why the bombing was allowed to happen.
I think there is a great urgency to have some kind of inquiry because I don't believe that the travelling public should be asked to risk their lives.
One thing we could do is ask the government of today, Keir Starmer, to release all the documentation about Lockerbie. That would be a tremendous help if we would do that. Why isn't it in the public interest after 36 years? I think there's something a lot of people would think is pretty fishy about that.
Prosecutors believe the case against Libya is now stronger than it was at the first trial 20 years ago. That evidence will be examined all over again when Abu Agila Massoud faces a jury in Washington. David Cowan, BBC News.
You're watching The Nine, still to come. We'll be treated to a beautiful performance from Scots Singer of the Year, Beth Malcolm. And we're joined on the set by Goofy as we hear about the difficulty a rescue charity is having finding homes for their dogs. Electric bikes are becoming an increasingly familiar sight on our streets. Now police are warning about the rising trend of modifying them illegally after a series of collisions and injuries in our city centres. Around 300 of them have been seized in a 9-month period this year. Our reporter Hope Webb has more.
Straight across. Michelle and her guide dog Paris love nothing more than exploring Glasgow together and visiting their favourite cafes. But her visual impairment can make navigating the city's streets difficult.
Paris, no. So, and if I'm not mistaken, that was a cyclist going through a green light. There we are.
Michelle was knocked down by a delivery driver on an e-bike when crossing the road.
My dog came straight across me, which is not what he's supposed to do when you're crossing a road. He's supposed to go straight. So I moved to correct him, and then before I even got the correction out, I was struck by the cyclist. He clipped me with his handlebars, bruising my ribs and my side, and the dog was clipped by the pedal.
Luckily, Michelle wasn't seriously injured, and the driver responsible was later convicted, but she's had to build up her confidence again.
Guide dog owners all the time are very concerned about being hit by regular cyclists, and now that we have these larger, heavier, almost quieter cyclists, it is a huge concern.
Legally, e-bikes must have pedals and shouldn't go faster than 15.5 miles an hour. They're also subject to the same road laws as other bikes and can only travel on cycle paths and roads. Between January and September this year, officers removed 281 e-bikes after they broke these rules. And this warehouse is where many of them are stored.
So this is one that's made as an electric bike, and we'll see these at 30, 40 miles an hour in the city centre, on the pavements, bumping up and down the pavements. This is a normal pedal cycle which has then been adapted, and it's had electric motor attached to it, and you can see the back wheels, that's basically the drive wheel for it. This one's obviously been designed, looks like, for off-road. This is the kind of the upper end of it. This is it's just an electric motorbike basically. The ones we've got here today, they can be quite big, heavy machines. We've had instances of them going through red lights and striking vehicles and causing themselves serious injury. So it's a danger not only to members of the public and pedestrians, but also to themselves. If you're stopped by us, then you will likely be charged with the offences of not having any insurance for the bike, and your vehicle, your bike will be seized by the police, and it'll be extremely costly to get it back.
Police believe they're just scratching the surface of this problem, and ahead of Christmas they're issuing a warning to those thinking of buying or modifying these often dangerous vehicles. Hope Webb, BBC News.
Now, being home for Christmas is something most of us take for granted, but for many hospital patients it's often more a hope than a reality. Well, staff at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde are aiming to make life better for both inpatients and those awaiting treatment by freeing up beds through their Home for Lunch scheme. Our reporter Sarah Toom has been to Paisley to find out more.
Well, it's only a few days now until Christmas, but of course hospital staff don't get time off just because it's the holidays. In fact, quite the opposite. And with a lot of seasonal illness around, all that adds extra pressure on NHS services, which are already stretched. But here at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley, they're launching a campaign to make sure that when patients are ready to leave the hospital and go home, that they can. And Annette Cunningham is here. Now, you're the senior charge nurse. Tell us a bit more about the campaign.
It's called the Home for Lunch campaign, so basically is to try and get people home to their own homes with their familiar surroundings before lunchtime and daylight hours. So we're looking for families to work with us to try and make sure everything's smooth for the transition from hospital to home, like things like making transport available, making sure their loved ones have got warm clothes to travel in, that there's some food in the house for them to eat when they get home and the heating's on, and also just to make sure they've got their keys and things if they're getting taken home by ambulance, so that we can actually get them into their own home.
So a lot of good practical steps there, but these are things you really need to think about in advance and take those actions in advance. How often do you find that patients are sort of left waiting to go home but they can't?
Yeah, that can happen quite often. You know, sometimes we've just not got the right things in place for them to go home. It's just we can't get all the boxes ticked in time, but we do try to strive to make sure everything is done to get people home, especially at this time of year at Christmas.
Well, here in the discharge wards, it's a brightly lit room with chairs round about and a Christmas tree even in the corner, a few decorations. And there's one smiling face here. I've just met Martin Campbell, and today's a very special day for you, Martin. Tell us why.
Because after 5 months, I'm eventually getting out. Well, I had a stroke back in the summer, believe it or not. And unfortunately, just with one thing or another, it's taken this long to get out, but I'm out now. So
But you've managed to do this before Christmas.
I know I didn't think this day would ever come, but there you go.
Martin Campbell ending that report from Sarah Toom. Time now for Sport, and Lewis, you're here for our last 9 sport rendezvous.
Yes, what a moment, Laura. And hopefully Hearts are going to end it on a high.
Well, maybe.
It wasn't going so well, but it is turning around, so that's good. Thanks very much, Laura. Yes, hello there. Well, Hearts were looking to reach the latter stages of a European competition for the first time in 35 years when they kicked off against Petro Cub at Tynecastle in the UEFA Conference League this evening. Now from European competition to the quarter-final of England's League Cup, where there's an intriguing clash between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United on the go just now. Well, both teams head into this one in fairly mixed form, which makes it all the more unpredictable. But it was the hosts who took the lead. Defender Pedro Porro with a hopeful effort from distance, but the United goalkeeper couldn't deal with a very neat finish from Dominic Solanke. Joshua Zirkzee has pulled one back for United after the hosts raced into a 3-goal lead, and Amad Diallo has scored another, so it is 3-2 there and very much game on. Rangers say the decision not to award them an extra time penalty in their League Cup final defeat to Celtic is damaging to the credibility of Scottish football, but they welcomed the transparency of the SFA after referees chief Willie Collum admitted that it was an unacceptable mistake. With the score at 3-3, Celtic defender Liam Scales pulled back Rangers' Vaclav Černý on the edge of the box. But as you can see here, the foul continued inside. The Ibrox club, who lost the final on penalties, were awarded a free kick by referee John Beaton, and it wasn't overturned by VAR officials Alan Muir and assistant Frank Connor. Well, Willie Collum wasn't available for media interviews on the incident, but speaking on the SFA's VAR review show, he said that it was a really, really poor decision and that the VAR officials rushed the call and were not forensic enough, and vowed that they would do their best through coaching and analysis to ensure that an incident like this never happens again. Now, Dennis Law, Joe Jordan, Graham Souness, just some of the Scotland stars of the past who had spells in Italian football. Now, midfielders Billy Gilmour and Scott McTominay are key players in the current Scotland squad, and as BBC Scotland found out, they're settling in well at Serie A club Napoli following their moves from England's top tier.
People to ask me, would I have been here 5 years ago? I'm saying no, but it's just the opportunities you get by working hard and giving your all. When the opportunity came up, I couldn't turn it down. It's always been something in my mind about going abroad and being a small player, technical player. I thought this would be definitely a league that suited me.
It's a huge city and everyone supports Napoli, so people are so passionate, and me and Billy are very, very grateful for the affection and the love that they've shown us so far, and we just want to repay that by playing as well as we possibly can and learning from the coach and doing our utmost best on the pitch.
The best thing to do is try and get settled in and especially learn the language. We both do Italian once a week so far.
Yeah.
People from the university come in and we spend 1 hour with them. All the boys speak Italian and they speak English too, but for us it's a respect thing. Of course, we're coming here, we need to show that we're not just giving it like 50%. You need to buy in fully to try and make yourself settle. So for us to learn Italian and pick up little things, and when we do say some things in the change room, they're surprised, oh, it's in Italian. So it's good, so of course we're going to try.
Billy molto bene. Me...
Così, così.
Yeah, sì. Un caffè americano, that's my favourite one.
Scotty loves, at dinner, after dinner, Scotty will ask for that to the waiter or waitress.
Scusa, that's my favourite one.
A bit far for us to try and go as close to Maradona. We know how much he's appreciated here and how much the people love him. You can see with the stadium named after him and how iconic he is, and in the city where you go, no matter where, you can see Maradona pictures or posters. It's just full of it in Naples, which is amazing for us as well.
I remember texting Billy whenever he was at Chelsea, and I said to him, you keep going the way that you're going and you'll be in the Scotland team and you'll be a big player. And that was, what, a good 6-7 years ago? I felt like the old dog telling him, come on. And now he's took my place. Nah, it's been seamless to be fair.
Yeah. It's been good. I mean, of course, both in the Scotland team, and it's pretty easy when you come to a new club and you've got that familiar face. And yeah, we've got closer. Obviously, at Scotland squad, you're there for what, 10 days, and you're doing a lot, maybe other stuff, different stuff. But for us, it's been top, and obviously travelling back together and travelling here, it's been fun.
Certainly seems fun, and you can see the full documentary on the iPlayer. That's available from tomorrow afternoon. Sticking with international players now, and defender Kieran Tierney made his long-awaited return from injury when he started for Arsenal in last night's League Cup win over Crystal Palace. The 27-year-old hasn't played since being injured at the Euros. He played 69 minutes in the 3-2 win last night before going off with cramp. His appearance coincided with reports that Arsenal have decided not to extend his contract when it ends this summer, sparking suggestions of a return to Celtic. And finally to boxing, where there was the most bizarre situation when world heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk and challenger Tyson Fury met to face off ahead of Saturday's rematch in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine's Usyk became the first unified champion in 25 years when he edged a split decision victory over his English opponent 6 months ago in Riyadh. And in a tense atmosphere today, the fighters stared at one another in front of the world's media for, wait for this, more than 11 minutes. Neither man willing to back down.
I got nothing to say, apart from there's going to be a whole lot of hurt and pain in this fight. You watch. That's all I got to say. Talking's been done. You know, the first fight, I talked, I joked, all my career. This time I'm serious.
Now we have just a performance, talks, cameras, light, kind of show. Everything gonna be taking place on Saturday night on the 21st.
How long do you think we could stare at each other for? Alana?
Not for 11 minutes.
Yeah, maybe not.
I was once in a traffic jam with Tyson Fury, though. True story.
There you go. Well, briefly before I go, good news for Hearts is if it stays like this, they will get a playoff spot. They're still winning, so good news there.
Yay, let's end it on a high.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Lewis.
Thanks,
now, Panto season is well and truly in full swing.
Oh no, is it?
Oh yes it is, and the infamous Panto trio Alan Stewart, Grant Stott and Jordan Young are performing again in Edinburgh, this time in Cinderella. The annual event has moved from its traditional home of the King's Theatre to the Festival Theatre, stop laughing Lewis, while the former undergoes a multi-million-pound refurbishment. But you can expect the usual Panto magic. Our entertainment reporter Indigo Stafford caught up with the cast to find out all about it.
Another year of Panto in the capital. How are you feeling?
How are you feeling, Alan?
I feel fine. Every year I get worried, am I going to be able to remember words? And then I realise, no, I don't.
Is this your best one yet?
This one's probably the most magical. I think it ticks all the kind of real fairy tale element.
I think this year, more than any other year, we have catered for every member of the audience. You know, every age, there's something for everybody. It's a bit of magic.
So this year, Grant, you're playing the evil stepmother, Baroness Hibernia. Is that based on a little Edinburgh football team?
It's a little play on my particular allegiance to a certain football team in Edinburgh, which we've had great fun with over the years here in Panto. So, and this is the reason I'm looking like this. I don't normally.
Really?
Baroness Hibernia Fortuna is the wickedest of all villains, I think, in Panto.
And how many football puns have you managed to squeeze into the show?
I try every year to try and get as many as I possibly can, and it's funny because last year I did a joke. One of my first jokes was about Stevie Naismith, who was the manager at Hearts, and because they weren't doing too well. But the minute I started doing that joke, they started winning, and by the end of the run, it just was dying on his backside. It just wasn't funny anymore. Yeah, football's a big part, and it's also like like any Panto. If you go to Aberdeen, then they'll obviously be talking about the fortunes of Aberdeen Football Club and the likes. It's maybe trickier in Glasgow for lots of reasons, but.
Alan, you're 74 now, and yet you've got better moves than most youngsters. What's your secret?
74, thank you. Not 84 or 94. The wee boy on stage today said, "You look 90."
Well, you're not getting a goodie back.
He didn't, exactly, he didn't get a goodie back. I don't know, I'm just lucky. I've got my hair, I'm slim. These are two things that go for you, Do you know Cinderella was my first pantomime ever in 1975. Wow. 75, 76. And it's always got a soft spot for it because it's such a great story. Everyone knows it.
Does it feel like a full circle moment for you?
It is actually. Well, I don't want to think of it as a full circle because that means I might be dead next year. So I don't want to think of it as a full circle. It's like a 3/4 circle with still a quarter to go.
Now, the Dogs Trust says they've seen an increase in the number of pets being handed in as their owners can't afford to keep them. One centre in West Calder are full to capacity and now has a waiting list to take in dogs who are looking for their forever home. Earlier, I met Susan Toner from the centre and Goofy, an abandoned Poiters Staffy cross. I asked Susan how Goofy ended up in their care.
Well, Goofy came to us as a stray. He has a very sad story, or a lucky story perhaps, in that we were approached on a Sunday evening the night before he was due to be put to sleep at the pound, and we were very lucky that he and another dog that had that fate, we were able to take them into the Dogs
I didn't
Trust.
know that still happened, that dogs were being put down.
In the local pounds, yes. The council pounds, if they're not rehomed or they're not claimed, then there are more and more dogs this last year getting put to sleep in the pounds. So he's a very lucky boy. So he's only a year old, he's just a baby. We don't understand why no one would have wanted him or kept him, or indeed why no one came forward to even rescue him from the pound. So he's a very lucky boy. We absolutely fallen in love with him. He's, as I say, he's just a year old. He's really just a teenager in dog years. You can see he loves to play with toys, he loves to eat treats, he's learning all about the world. We suspect that he is a very big dog. He's a pointer cross. We just wonder if he grew bigger than someone could perhaps manage.
And are there particular breeds that you find do tend to stay in needing rehomed more often?
I think the more popular the breed is in society, then we will see more of those. So we do see a lot of staffies, a lot of lurchers, collies, but a lot of the dogs that were bought during lockdown, so a lot of small breeds like cockapoos and so on are coming into us now as well.
And do you think that's because people took something on and they didn't fully appreciate the commitment of a dog?
A lot of the time people haven't understood maybe how big a dog would grow or the financial commitment. There are other people who ask the Dogs Trust to take in their dog and they absolutely adore and love their dog, but they've got themselves into a situation where they can no longer care for the dog. It could be financial, it could be working hours or a change in circumstance. Then we have dogs that come in, perhaps someone has passed away or gone into care. So many reasons.
Oh, look at you, look at you. Yeah, so I mean, they say don't get a dog for Christmas, don't get your kids a dog for Christmas, but you are hoping that people will have a think about whether they do have room in their homes. So what would be your message to people who are maybe thinking about looking at rehoming?
I think the message is always about making a very informed decision. You know, don't on a whim think it's Christmas time, this is I'm going to go out and get a dog as a present. Think very carefully. A dog will live for around 14 years, so you want to think about the size of dog, the breed of dog, is it right for your lifestyle, but also whether you do have the finances to care for that dog. So can you afford vet bills, vet insurance and so on, and also do you have the time and the commitment, the lifestyle for the dog that you're choosing. So we would encourage people to come to rescue. There are so many dogs, we're always full. We'd encourage people to come to Dogs Trust and rehome a dog from us. But if you are going to get a dog privately, perhaps from a breeder, is to make sure that you do the research there. Make sure you're going to a reputable breeder, that you see mum with the puppies, and that it is a Kennel Club registered breeder.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Susan and thank you to Goofy for being so well behaved.
Thank you.
Yeah, we hope people listen to that message. Thank you very much, Susan. Now, as we near the end of our last ever 9, we want to do something we've loved doing throughout our run, and that's celebrating Scottish talent. Beth Malcolm from Perth was recently crowned Scots Singer of the Year at the Scottish Trad Music Awards. Her second album, Folkmosis, is described as a musical coming-of-age story, and she's gearing up to perform in a multimedia event at next year's Celtic Connections Festival in Glasgow. Beth joined us earlier to give us a sneak preview. Beth, welcome to the 9. You have had quite an extraordinary year, culminating with winning Scots Singer of the Year. Tell us a bit about how it's been.
Yeah, it's been a mad year for me. I recorded and released my second album and had my first tour in Germany, and just found out, like you said, last month that I'd won Scots Singer of the Year. So it's been, more than I could have hoped for this year. So I'm feeling good.
But you've won Scots Singer of the Year before. You won it in 2022. How did that change your career?
Yeah, well, it definitely did change my career because it opens up, I think, shows that maybe you wouldn't have had access to before, and I think maybe just gives you that chance to show that you've got people behind you as well, and I think folk are coming out and supporting because that's on the poster, and so it's been a really yeah, really important moment.
It's interesting you say you've been in Germany touring. How do they take to kind of traditional Scottish music?
Well, there's actually a huge market in Germany for Scottish music. I think there's a lot of love and appreciation for it, and a lot of our bands, Celtic bands and folky bands, are spending a lot of their year over there. So yeah, it feels like a wee home away from home in the folk scene there.
Oh, that's good to hear. Now, tell us about your latest album. It's got a really interesting title, Folkmosis. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you're saying it right, yeah.
So what's that about?
Yeah, so it's really my coming of age story, and folkmosis comes from the word osmosis, and I grew up in a really traditional household with traditional folky music happening all around me, and I think, like, for a lot of us, you don't really choose what your folks are into, and so you soak it all up and absorb it all, and as a teenager I really rejected Scottish music and moved away from it and experimented in pop music and jazz and all this kind of stuff, and it wasn't until I was older and was going back to some folk pubs in Edinburgh that I heard all that music that I had absorbed and grown up with as a small wee kid, and really kind of all came flooding back, and that's really why I've come back to traditional music as a grown woman, and this album follows that journey. So you really start off with the kind of music I was brought up around, then gets a bit poppy and jazzy, electronic in the middle, and then comes home, which is really what folkmosis is. It's like a coming home story.
And that sounds absolutely amazing. Tell us a bit about where people can see you if they want to come and see you live.
Yeah, so we have like the full big band launches happening at the end of January, so 30th and 31st of January. I'm going back to my hometown theatre, Perth Theatre, for 2 big band shows, and then we are heading to Glasgow for Celtic Connections the next night at the Barony Hall on the 1st of February.
Wonderful. Well, you're going to give us a little taster of your music, so
yes.
We will enjoy that. So here is Beth Malcolm and Growing.
In this here house, these 4 walls, where I've come from, all I've known I have outgrown. In this here house, with 4 tall steps, as I step inside, I say goodbye to the young girl. 'Cause oh, I'm growing, and oh, I'm growing in this here house. Perhaps I'll lie with the love in this here house. Perhaps I'll find that I'm carrying life with a heart wide open. I'll sow seeds for the healing, and I'll shelter my mother, and I'll grow with my brother, and I'll sing with my old man. 'Cause oh, I'm growing, 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 growing. Let there be laughter, let there be wine, let there be heartbreak in time. Let there be laughter, let there be wine, let there be heartbreak in time. Let there be laughter, let there be wine, let there be heartbreak in time. Let there be laughter, let there be wine, let there be heartbreak in time.
We absolutely loved that. Now, just to bring you up to speed with the football, Hearts have conceded from a penalty, so it's now 2-2 as it stands. They will miss a playoff spot as the 25th ranked team in the league phase. Only the top 24 get through. It's now into stoppage time at Tynecastle, and we will keep you up to date. Time now, though, for the weather. And Christopher, another storm coming this weekend?
It's pretty stormy through this weekend, yes. Very high winds. There could well be some disruption, not only for people doing last-minute Christmas shopping, but anyone trying to get anywhere, actually. Certainly ferries could well be disrupted, maybe the trains too. And we could see some power cuts. We could see some big waves around the west coast. That could be dangerous in places, and some damage to buildings as well. So really unwelcome windy weather this weekend.
Before Christmas, yeah.
Thanks very much indeed. Good evening to you. Some lovely Christmas lights there in the capital earlier on from one of our weather watchers. And actually at the moment it is largely quiet and calm and clear and cold. But overnight cloud arrives and rain too, and that means whilst the overnight lows at the moment are close to freezing, by the end of the night those temperatures will climb. So tomorrow, and it's a bit of a soggy start to Friday, with a cold front working its way eastwards, taking rain out towards the North Sea. First thing, it's cloudy, and there's the rain towards the west coast, beginning to work its way eastwards. Some showery bits and pieces ahead of it. Temperatures here at 8 in the morning around 6 or 7 Celsius, and blustery winds too, but those winds will ramp up as that rain arrives, pushes in across parts of the west and the northwest, and journeys eastwards through the course of the day. So let's go through Friday morning towards Friday lunchtime and watch the rain. There it goes, pushing its way across the country through much of central and eastern Scotland by lunchtime. As we head into the afternoon, it should clear, and that means for many it should brighten up, dry up. There'll still be a number of showers. The longest gaps between the showers likely in the east. Temperatures up on today, 7 to 9 Celsius, still brisk winds. And those showers still with us as we head into the evening, but as Laura mentioned, pretty unsettled this weekend. A deep area of low pressure bringing some very high winds. Some disruption is likely as a result. And we do have a pretty much countrywide Met Office yellow warning. Gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour. In the northwest, the wind speeds will be higher than that, and that's where we're likely to see some significant disruption. So if you are planning to travel ahead of Christmas, do take note of the forecast on Saturday and Sunday. Through the day, frequent squally showers, some rain, sleet and snow in the mix at times, occasionally to lower levels. Temperatures 8 or 9 Celsius, but very windy. The black arrows there indicating wind gusts. Sunday morning, a few rain, sleet and snow showers to low levels, and then a windy day with further rain showers. That's the forecast for now.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And sadly, that brings us to the end of not only tonight's show, but also the end of the 9. There'll be news coverage over the festive period with the 7 here on the BBC Scotland channel. And then in the new year, there'll be a new programme and podcast, so keep an eye out for that. It's been an honour to be with you for the past 5, almost 6 years. Thank you to all of our guests, but particularly to our crew and production team who have worked tirelessly on this programme. Before we go, let's take a look back at the stories that have shaped the news and our lives.
Welcome for the first time to the 9.
Every Monday to Friday, our team will bring you an hour of national, UK-wide and international news.
Our top story tonight, the US presidential election, the UK economy,
drama in Westminster.
Plus the rest of today's news and sport.
Welcome to the 9.
The number of people infected with a new virus in China has trebled.
Prepare for a significant outbreak of coronavirus in the weeks and months ahead.
Across the UK, there are now 39 cases.
The death toll from coronavirus in Scotland continues to rise.
And with those new records come new restrictions.
Life under lockdown. The country adjusts to the extraordinary measures to battle an invisible killer.
It's really very strange here in the city centre of Glasgow. The streets practically empty.
The UK-wide death toll has now passed 20,000.
It's not going to be forever, I promise. There is an end.
Today, a long overdue reason to be cheerful.
The number of people who have had their first dose of the vaccination in Scotland has now surpassed
3 million.
Get yourself vaccinated, get boosted.
The legal limits on how we live our lives will be lifted.
You can hug your loved ones again.
Donald Trump has threatened to send in the military to quell growing civil unrest in the United States over the death of a black man, George Floyd.
A series of protests are planned in Scotland this weekend, including a major demonstration in Glasgow.
There's still racism in Scotland and always has been.
Extraordinary scenes developing in Washington, D.C. tonight as supporters of Donald Trump have scuffled with police and stormed the U.S. Capitol building.
Barbara, if you can hear me, can you just tell me what you are seeing?
I'm looking at the Capitol building, and Trump protesters have swarmed over the front of it. There has been a report of one person being shot.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger.
It's a witch hunt.
Donald Trump is now the first president in US history to be impeached twice.
From convicted felon to the most powerful man in the world once again.
The country has sent him back to Washington and the White House for another 4 years.
God bless America. Thank you very much.
Nicola Sturgeon resigns. Rajdeep, I'd imagine the new surprise Westminster.
Like in Hollywood, it's been a complete shock.
My successor, whoever he or she may be, will lead Scotland to independence.
We're talking about small business.
No, but you
It's
said
a small business
you said
right now.
Hamza Yusuf resigns as First Minister.
How quickly things have changed.
A continent in crisis, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
We are really in, to use the phrase, uncharted territory.
Putin's forces now occupy southern and eastern parts of the country.
Russian troops surround Ukraine's major cities.
Are there signs of a concerted attempt to now seize the city?
If they can't take a place, they destroy it to rubble with constant shelling.
We will continue fighting, whatever the cost.
What are your feelings about the night ahead?
The reality has changed for Ukrainians.
Laura Miller joins us from the official home of the monarch in Scotland.
People have come in their thousands to say farewell and pay their final respects.
There's already been quite a lot of doubt here that Theresa May is going to get a deal signed, sealed and delivered.
They're actually having an argument about whether or not we should have an argument.
The UK's first day outside the EU.
Clearly the focus now is very much on a second referendum.
A large demonstration calling for independence so Scotland can rejoin the European Union.
A surprise attack on Israel by Palestinian militants has left dozens dead and hundreds injured.
We're not very far from an Israeli military base that was overrun by Hamas militants.
Israel retaliates as nearly 2,500 targets are hit along the Gaza Strip.
The number of people killed in Gaza has now passed 40,000.
People have a few litres of water, lack of food.
A man was shot dead by police after a prolonged knife attack.
Details are still emerging.
Some of the images from the scene just up here are too distressing to show.
In the end, it was inevitable. She'd lost the support of her party, she'd lost control of Brexit, and she was facing another crushing loss at the polls. Today, Theresa May quit.
Boris Johnson's taken over at number 10, but questions are already being asked about how long he'll remain in office.
Just 2.5 years after sweeping to power, he has been forced out by his own colleagues.
Boris Johnson is out, Liz Truss is in.
Just 3.5 months since Boris Johnson stood at that lectern and resigned himself, now his successor has done just the same.
Rishi Sunak will become the youngest PM in centuries.
And we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Sir Keir Starmer addressed Parliament for the first time as Prime Minister after Labour's landslide victory in the general election.
2 decades of disappointment come to an end.
Scotland are off to the Euros.
This was a nation coming together to believe that this time it might be different. Now, it wasn't.
The match that broke Scottish hearts.
It is what it is.
It's going to be a great war. There's a massive
hey.
And
where else would you come to ask people about Brexit?
One midge, singular, is midge.
No, midge.
Plural is midgie.
Certainly a workout for the abs. Oh, no, midgie or midgie.
in the jungle, anything goes.
So it's about 5 or 6 centimetres.
You all right?
Okay. Aberdeen will take on Cupholders Celtic on Sunday.
I'm not very sure about this.
It's like me personally.
He's so used to the telly now.
He's wrong. You're wrong.
Martin, midgies every time.
You've done something for us here.
I'm a bit nervous about this.
My glory. Is this a Friday night outfit?
I was just going to the bang.
There's me being right, and then there's everybody else.
Chod the charam, which more love my carriage fear, still loves a hard go here.
And how will you hide and where will you bide? Lass, I'll learn to fly.
That is it for tonight. All of us, bye-bye for now.
Bye for now. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
And so for a final time, goodbye from everyone here on The Nine. Thank you for being with us.